You raise your kids, you pay for them and pretty much everything, you cater to their every need, you house them. Is it too much to ask that you and you alone as a household unit get to instill values that you believe in your children? Well, a Maryland case that could decide whether or not radical school officials can teach your kids a bunch of weird sexual stuff without consent or even your knowledge was argued in front of the Supreme Court today. And right out the gate, even liberal Justice Kagan, who isn't married and doesn't have any kids, even before she considered the religious liberty aspect of the case, had reservations about what was being taught to our children.
I suspect there are a lot of non-religious parents who weren't all that thrilled about this, and then you add in religion, and that's even more serious. You're going to have a lot of parents, it seems to me. I don't think you can say just because it hasn't happened. Once we say something like what you are asking us to say, it'll be like, opt-outs for everyone.
If she's got reservations, this might be a 9-0 decision. Think about the sides here. One side has a bunch of groomers wanting the school district to have sole authority to show stuff like this to your kids, even some of which is mandatory. Like this exercise for 4-year-olds to look for images that they might find at a gay pride parade. Asking 4-year-olds to look for, and I'm quoting here, drag queens and leather underwear. The same book featured an image of Marsha P. Johnson asking kids to identify him. You know who that is? It's an American gay liberation activist and self-identified drag queen known as an outspoken advocate for gay rights. He was one of the prominent figures in the Stonewall Uprising of 1969. What was the Stonewall Uprising? I had to look it up. That 4-year-olds are being required to learn about this in a positive light, by the way, to praise this person for being part of this. 1969, cops raided a drag queen gay bar that was serving liquor without a license. Patrons, including Marsha P. Johnson, resisted arrest and rioted. Then cops, because they were outnumbered, sought shelter back inside one part of the bar, and then the alphabet community lit their own bar on fire with the cops inside of it. Yeah, I don't want my kids being taught to celebrate people like that are criminals either. And since my hard-earned dollars, my tax dollars, are paying those teachers' salaries, then I should have a say in what they're teaching. And it gets worse. The rest of the books, just by their title, shouldn't be anywhere near kids. Love Violet, Pride Puppy, Prince and Knight, Born Ready, What Are Your Words, Maiden and Princess, My Rainbow, Uncle Bobby's Wedding. All associating queer, gay, trans, or even over-sexuality. But the lawyer for the parents had a very interesting point, that parents can currently opt out of certain educational sections like sex ed, but can't opt out of this.
It concerns sex and gender, and that the Maryland legislature itself has recognized these subjects raise special concerns and has provided for an opt-out from the health classes where these matters are discussed.
That's right. And currently in Montgomery County, you can opt out from the very same instruction during health class, but then you're required to stay during story time.
This goes beyond just the Maryland law. This goes directly to who is our children and who they belong to. We know where the left stands. They believe that children should be influenced by the state at their sole discretion with their values that they think are relevant. The liberal sentiment is that no parent should have say over the values instilled in any child. I know this is crazy, I know. I totally disagree, but the left thinks that the values instilled in my children should be that of what their community wants. And by community, they mean whatever radical nuts dancing in front of the Supreme Court today like this weirdo. Don't believe me? They say it all the time.
You've heard me say it many times. You've heard me say it many times about our children. But it's true. They're all our children. And the reason you're the teachers of the year is because you recognize that. They're not somebody else's children. They're like yours when they're in the classroom.
We have never invested as much in public education as we should have because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
That last quote, that was the Virginia gubernatorial race, is the fundamental difference between the two sides in this case. If you recall, he then lost the election to Glenn Youngkin in large part because of that comment. And I think logic will lose at the Supreme Court on this, too. Even Hillary Clinton put it in her book, quote, "It takes a village to raise a child." Not really. And now part of this case hinges on the contents of some of the lesson plans that, remember, by the way, these are mandatory for these kids in the current case that they're arguing. They tell kids that they know better than their parents, telling fifth graders that the child knows best about gender transitions in fifth grade. Books like Born Ready, A Story of a Boy Named Penelope. Stop it! Don't teach my kids in fifth grade this super weird perverted stuff. Then they sell it as like, oh, it's so fun. And then they tell the kids that they know better than me, the parent. Right. And this was addressed today. Whose rights are we talking about here?
Whose interests are we concerned with here? Is it the interests of the children or is it the interests of the parents?
Thank you, Your Honor. We have named children, but for the preliminary injunction, which again was filed 2 years ago, we have raised the rights of the parents.
The parents, correct. Because the left says it's about the children's rights. Weird. I wonder how the left would react if someone made the same argument that kids have, at the same age, have the right to own guns. I mean, that's a right, correct? Well, Carl, someone could get hurt. We need to protect these kids from these dangers. Oh, really? Because that's kind of my point here. And these parents, and they have all the people there, that is their argument today at the Supreme Court. This gender dysphoria that is being pushed in some of these weird, perverted books harm children. You're talking about sometimes irreversible hormones. You know, the ones that puberty blockers that they say? Those are the same chemicals that they're given to pedophiles in prison to chemically castrate them. The suicide rates of trans people is almost 50%. 50. Half. So tell me, with a straight face, that teaching kids all this trans stuff is a good thing. Honestly. You see, we as parents have rights over our institutions. I know Randy Weingarten doesn't like to admit that, but that's what this case is about. Because those institutions, they work for you and me. We pay those teachers and those bureaucrats, we pay their salaries and entrust them with our kids to make them better. And if we see something we don't like, a good educator who actually gives a darn about the system should honor that. Because they're not their kids, they're our kids. And all these arguments were made before the religious part that was even mentioned. But the very important part that was like the death nail for the liberal case here came with the religious argument.
Are the parents being pressured to abandon or modify their religious beliefs in order to access a public benefit?
Exactly. Are they forced to give up religious beliefs for public school access? And that I think that won the case for these parents. I hope. Look, kids shouldn't be exposed to any of this stuff at any age. Not straight, not gay, not queer, nothing sexual. Parents opting out should be the least of it. It shouldn't even be there. It shouldn't even be a discussion, but here we are today in 2025. Like, hopefully this fixes it, and we can get back to teaching kids, like, I don't know, reading, writing, and arithmetic.
He loves the Constitution. He fights for what's right. He hates the bad guys. He's a freedom warrior. He's your freedom warrior. Watch Carl Higbie every weekday on Newsmax.